Let me share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen? Okay, let me minimize this. All right, okay, let's go to Canvas. All right, so let's see the chat. Yes, okay, excellent. Let's continue where we left off yesterday. We had started to introduce you to JavaScript and jQuery, and we had started working on the assignment, the A2, assignment number 2, which is JavaScript and jQuery. And let's take a look at where we left off. This is I believe the assignment for this section. All right, let me run it and let's see where we are. Let's see, question on the chat. Professor, after deploying the project to Heroku, when navigating to the page, I'm getting an error below. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that offline during office hours, or we can chat afterwards on that. So I have relaxed the requirement of having to deploy to Heroku. I know a lot of people are still having problems. That's fine. We'll work with you to resolve those things, and you know, hopefully we'll have it all resolved by the time comes for the next assignment to be due. Have you pushed? I did. I pushed the latest in the repository, so you should have the very latest that I have here that you can start looking at it on your own. When is the due date for the next assignment? I think it's either next Monday or Wednesday. I think maybe Wednesday, I think. And yeah, A1, we need to deploy that to Heroku, which A2 will also need it to be deployed in Heroku. So as long as hopefully by next Wednesday, we'll have everybody up and running on Heroku for the second assignment. Yeah, we need everything to be running at Heroku at some point, okay? But I know folks are still having issues, technical issues, and you know, the TAs and myself will keep working with you to resolve those, right? It's not your fault. I know everybody has been working hard to get that going. All right, so let's see where we left off. I just ran the application, and let me navigate there. Localhost 8080. And I believe we had started taking a look at the course list, and looking at being able to create courses, right? Were we able to create courses? I forget. Apparently not. Let's see. Do we get any errors from last? Looks like we have 4 errors. Let's look at the console. Failed to load course list CSS and failed to load the course list JS. Okay, so let's try and fix that. Let's look at the course list HTML. Let's review where we left off yesterday, Wednesday. All right, so we started playing around with course list.html, right? And we had copied the header from source code that we had given you from the assignment, and we created an add course button. I don't see that add course button. Course list. Where's the course list? Where's the button? Oh, there we go. This is where we are. Okay, this is more like it. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I believe we were able to create courses. There we go. There they are, right? And were we able to delete courses? No, not yet. Okay, so we'll play with that today.
Hi, Professor.
Yes.
Just for a reminder, you showed how to grab the ID to remove the row, but you were the row, and you were about to show how to remove the row, whole row.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right.
No problem.
Excellent. So yeah. All right. So let's take a look at that then. We had been working about creating the table, right? And dynamically, right, rendering the course. It takes the courses as an array. And this is I think we had an array of courses here, right? There we go. We got a couple of courses there. We played around being able to create new courses, right, dynamically. We looked at creating a button that if we clicked on that button, right, it calls add course, and add course creates a new course, right? Calls this function create course, which is down here. And then we were taking a look at this delete button, and the delete button was right here, right? Being able to take a look at this events. Okay. Okay, let's see the chat. What is the repository name for the last lecture? It's the same repository that we've been using. Let me show you. Let's see, we can say git remote/v. It's this one. Let me copy it. And the link is in Canvas. So you'll take a look in Canvas. You have the links to all the repositories are going to be available there. All right, excellent. So let's see. So presumably, we are, after we render all our courses in this for loop, I'm going to grab these classes and I'm going to associate a click event on all of them, right? Because there's going to be more than one, right? There's going to be one button for each course, and any one I click, I'm going to select this event over here, right? So let's see what that does. Let's see. Let's clear this, and I'm going to delete. Okay, looks like it's that button right there, right? And if we open it up, we see that it's this button with the ID. Notice that it highlights when I hover over this, right? So I have a link over that. But even though I have the button, it's a raw HTML button, right? It's part of the DOM that we have there, right? If I right click and hover over it and take a look at it, you'll notice that there's a button. See that? It's right in the DOM, and that's what I'm retrieving here, the raw HTML DOM object, right? Which is not only is it raw, but it's a dumb object. It's very dumb. It doesn't have any behaviors associated with it. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to grab that target and I'm going to convert it into a jQuery object, right? That's going to have some nice API, some nice functions that would allow me to manipulate, right? So for instance, we're going to wrap it and I'm going to store it in a local variable. This is the button. So this is the delete button. And we're going to wrap it inside of jQuery. So jQuery, this jQuery function, not only can it, right? It's a very powerful function. Not only can it take CSS strings, right? Not only can it take CSS strings, so that you can read elements from the DOM. It can also take references to DOM object that are referring to pieces of the document, right? So it's a very, very powerful overloaded function, right? That can take different arguments and it behaves differently. And like this this prepend, right, function, it's also a jQuery function that can take as argument a whole HTML this whole HTML string, right? So not only can we read from the DOM that already exists, but I can create new DOM objects that I can then push into the DOM, right, and manipulate it that way. So this is an example of being able to take a raw reference to the DOM that is part of the event that is generated by JavaScript, by the low-level JavaScript engine, right, that has links to the DOM elements. But right, we can pass those and convert them into high-level jQuery objects that have a nice API. For instance, one of the APIs is, for instance, being able to read any classes, right, or any attributes inside of that object. Like for instance, I can read the class, I can read the ID, because I can retrieve the class and see what that class is. I can say, give me the attribute called class, right, and I can store it, the class, right, and I can then print it. I can say console log the class. Right, so if I run that, and I click on delete, notice that there's our class. See that? There's a class, web dev delete. See that? I can also grab the other attributes, such as the ID. I can read the ID. Let me grab the other attribute, the ID. So the ID. So this is the ID, right? And let's print the ID. The ID. Okay, so let's do that. Let's refresh. I'm going to click this delete. There it is, 9. If I click this one, it's 7. And if I click on this one, it's number 4. Okay, that means that I can now use that as an index into the array. I know which element in the array I just clicked on, right? So I can splice out. I can manipulate the array so that I can remove it from the array. So I can say the courses array, right? I can splice out. Splice is a function that allows me to add elements to the array or remove elements from the array. The push function allows me to append elements in the array at the end of the array, but splice allows me to put them anywhere in the array, or allows me to remove elements from the array that are already there. So the first argument to splice is the index, where I want to add or remove, right? And the second argument is how many elements do I want to remove? Okay, starting at that index, I just want to remove 1. Okay, so once I do that, I can then call my function to re-render the courses, right, with the new list of courses, which is going to now not have, right, it's going to be missing that that one element. Okay, all right, so let's do that. Let's refresh. And let's see if this works. Delete. Ooh, look at that, right? I'm removing, I just removed 44. Let's remove 22 over here. There we go. So it looks like the delete is working, right? I can delete all of these. So you can see that. Or I can create new ones. Oh, I guess create, add courses over here, right? Add course. And so I can add and delete. I can add and delete. All right. Okay, so what about being able to read these input fields, right? So that I can create courses from the input fields. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to have to bind, right? Somehow I'm going to have to use jQuery to bind variables to these input fields and the dropdown so that we can read that, and then actually when I create on the create button, I can actually read data from there. Okay, so we can do that. We can at the beginning we can, or somewhere, it doesn't matter. Let's go at the bottom. I can read variables. I can grab each one of those fields. And what are those fields called? Let's see. The fields were called. Where are they? Table. They're here, right there, right? So we have. There we go. So these I need to give them names, right? Again, I could use IDs or I can use classes, right? I personally prefer classes. You can do everything that you can do with an ID. You can also do with classes, right? So, but ID are more restrictive, right? Because IDs enforce the fact that you can only have one ID per class, per website, per page. Okay, they have to be unique within the page. But I mean, you could do the same thing with classes. You just have to be rigorous and know that, hey, I'm going to use this class only once. So I'm going to stick to classes. Right? So this input field, I'm going to give it a class. I'm going to call it webdev. And this is going to be the title field. Okay. And this one is going to be, what is this? The second one is the seats, right? So I'm going to give it a class here. So webdev -seats field.
Professor, right? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
I just had one question. So why would you prefer IDs over classes? I mean,
no, the other way around. I prefer classes.
Sorry, classes over IDs. Yeah, why would you do that? Because the class would isn't it supposed to be for like a class of objects?
Right.
I
So
I don't get the reasoning why we are preferring classes over IDs.
Yeah. So what I can do is that I can do everything that I can do with an IDs. I can.
Right now. Check your modem or router connection and try again.
I was having trouble with the internet earlier. I can do everything that I can do with an ID. I can also do with classes, right? From jQuery's point of view, or from the DOM, being able to refer to things on the DOM, I can retrieve things either by ID using the hash, or I can retrieve them by class using the period. Okay. The only thing that IDs enforce is that they should be unique within the within a page, right? But I can also do that with a class just by being rigorous and knowing that, this is the only field, right? It's the only semester field, or this is the only seats field. Okay, so there's nothing that the ID buys me in addition, right, that I cannot also do with a class. Also,
right. I get that, but
yeah, let me finish one more thing.
okay. Yeah.
The other thing is that even though it's unique within this HTML snippet of code that I have here, I often HTML only knows about its file, right? It doesn't know about IDs having the same values in some other HTML files, okay? Because the validation doesn't extend beyond the one page, right? But in single page applications, it's very common that you are bringing HTML snippets from one place, HTML snippets from some other place, right? And there's no way to guarantee that those snippets, even though they might be using IDs that are unique within those snippets, there's no guarantee that when you build the page into something much more complex, right, that ID is indeed going to be unique, right?
Understood.
So the so what validation you bought within the page, within that context, really you lose it when you start considering that these are components that are reusable, that are meant to be in loops, and that you are dynamically building the page, and you can't guarantee that. So why have two different mechanisms of selecting and just stick to one of them? So classes are much more versatile like that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Sure. So I'm gonna need those three fields, and I'm going to need these buttons, right? So I'm gonna grab this this button as well. So this is web dev. So notice that I'm adding classes, not because I'm styling this, not because I'm making things red or blue or green or anything like that. I am grabbing classes because I want to be able to refer to them from my code. Okay, so it's very, very common, that you'll have classes or elements on the page only so that they can be referred to or give structure somehow, some logic for the controller or some module or component. So web dev create button. So I'm following a naming convention, right? All right, so I'm going to refer to these, and here I'm just going to load them into a variable. Now these variables, let's see, there's a question in the chat. Are there any cases where we should be using IDs instead of classes? No, there's no specific reason why you would want to use IDs. All right, so let's read here each one of the fields. So let's grab this one over here, the title field. So this will be the title field, and we're going to grab it by its class. All right, so jQuery, developers tend to be somewhat lazy. A good developer is a lazy developer, and by what I mean by that is that we tend to look for ways for automating as much as possible and creating shortcuts and creating abstractions that we can then build on top, right? And so what type jQuery, which are 6 letters, $ is a very common alias to jQuery, right? So this is the same as typing jQuery, right? So I'm grabbing that element, that DOM element. I'm also going to grab the seats field, and that's going to be, what is it? Seats, there we go. And we need which one? We need the semester field. So this is semester field. $. We grabbed it. There we go. And when do we need it? We'll need it when we click on the create button. We want to be able to retrieve the values for each one of those elements. So is the case if we are not using this class to style, but to use them in jQuery, we need to make sure the class is only used in only one of places. Yes. You would treat it uniquely as you would have a dictionary of all the classes and all the meanings and where they're being used, right? So you wouldn't willy-nilly just create classes here and there. You would follow a structure. Like for instance, I'm following here a naming convention, right? I know this is a field, right? It's meant to be input, some kind of input for the human to be able to type something and select some data, right? I'm also giving it some meaningful name. I'm also giving it that it's part of some project, right? So it has a meaningful name, and yes, they will be very well documented and would have a very specific role. Another convention that is very common is that these variables, there's nothing wrong with these variable names, but it's very common to add something to the name of the variable to let you know whether this is a local variable, it's a global variable. Well, you would avoid global variables. Also, if this variable is representative of some binding to some DOM element that has been retrieved using jQuery, right? So we're going to use a $ in front of this just so that we know that these are variables that are bound to the DOM, okay? Let's see, a question in the chat. Got it. Okay, so when do we want to use these $, these fields? Well, whenever we click on the button, right? And I think the button was called a create button, right? So we're going to grab that. So this is the create button. Oops, I was going to create button. And I'm going to grab the button by its class. There we go. And let's see something on the chat. Are there any good cases where we would want to use global variables? Never. Don't ever use global variables. What is meant by bound to the DOM? That means that jQuery goes out, right, retrieves the element that is in the DOM, and now we have it here in a variable. Now with that variable, I can manipulate that DOM element. I can remove it. I can change its color. I can change its style. I can now say that I'm going to listen for a click event, right? I'm going to handle a click event, right? Let's see on the chat. Why do you add $ before the variable names? Yes, so this is for us to remind ourselves that that we use jQuery to retrieve this DOM elements, right, and to bind it here. So it's not a variable that it's an integer or float or string, right? It's something that is bound to the DOM so that I can manipulate that DOM. Let's see in the chat. What is the DOM? So here, when you look at the elements, right, the HTML page, the HTML text that we created, right here, the HTML that we created here, right, the source, main, web app, course list. So the HTML, this is text, right? This is pure text, and it's being parsed. It's being parsed by the browser. The browser reads it, okay, and it creates an object representation of that ASCII file, right? And it creates an in-memory representation, which is graphically represented here. Okay, this is a hierarchical object, or that has a root at the HTML, and then it has all these hierarchical nodes, right? That creates like an inverted tree. Okay, so this in-memory representation is called the document object model, right? So the document is the HTML document. An object model means that it's an object representation of that ASCII file, right? So this is just plain text, but it's being read into memory into the DOM, right? And jQuery or JavaScript, the way we dynamically manipulate the view, right? Notice that each DOM object here, each DOM node has a graphical representation on what the browser draws on the screen, right? So the jQuery, we can manipulate what we want to see in the screen. We can manipulate it by manipulating the DOM, right? We can do it manually, right? Like for instance, I just manipulated it. I can remove the entire table, right? Manually, or we can do it programmatically, and that's what we're doing, right? We are programmatically manipulating the DOM, right? By adding rows and columns programmatically using jQuery. Okay. All right. So. And so yeah, so this create button, right, variable is bound to the button in the DOM. I went and fetched it from the DOM. Now I have it. I can now bind a function. Okay, and what should this do? Well, it should call the create function, right? We had created we have written a create course. There it is, right? We can call it, and here we have a hard-coded course, but we can instead of making it hard-coded, right? We can create here a function, right? That's going to call our create course function with an object. So but this object, I don't want it to be hard-coded, right? Instead, we're going to build that object. So we're going to say var new course. We're going to build that JSON object with the data that we might have typed into these fields, right? So instead of hard-coding this, we're going to grab the title field and we're going to grab its value. I'm going to grab the value, right? Same thing for the seats. I'm going to grab the value. These are functions that jQuery adds to these elements, to these DOM objects. Value. There we go. And once we have built the object using the JSON, the JavaScript object notation, we are going to pass that object into the create course, and the create course is going to push that course into the array of courses, and then it's going to ask the rendering of that course. Okay? Let's see on the chat. So the val dynamically fetches the value when you click the button rather than when the script loads initially. Well, no, these guys are doing it initially, right? They are initially doing this, creating the course. This one is just binding it. It's saying when you click this button, then I'm going to do this, right? Not before, only when you click that button. It'll call the create course. Chat, will this code work if you remove the $ symbol from the variable name? Yes, if I remove this and like that, the $ in the name doesn't give it any special behavior, right? It's only a naming convention that we might want to add just to remind ourselves that these are not variables that are storing primitive data types. You know, it's not strings, not integers, not floats, right? Not dates. They are objects that are bound to the DOM, right? So yeah, it'll still work if I don't add the $. It was just a naming convention. Let's see in the chat. Right, the val when you click the button. Yes. Okay, so yes, I've removed the $ just to illustrate that this will still work just fine. All right, so let's add here. So this is CS5610 seats. I think we have like 90 students, and this is spring. So I'm going to say create, and there it is. See that? CS5610, 90, and spring. I can say CS3200. There's 80 students there, and let's say it's a summer. And say create, and there we go. See that? 3280 summer. Okay. So yeah, so we can read and values from the feed from this, right, and then add there. Let's see. Question in the chat. Why do you add a function that calls add course to the button rather than just add course? Why do you add a function that calls add course? That calls add course. I imagine. Do you mean the alternative? Are you saying this? Are you saying that we could have written it this way? Wait a minute. So instead of having this function, we could have done this, for instance. We can grab this, put it in here, and instead of having this function, just call this function. Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to understand your question. Yeah. So the problem with this, right, is that here when we are declaring the .click, this is going to be invoked immediately, right? This is an immediate invocation on that function, and then it's going to return whatever it returns. Whatever it returns is going to be an argument to the click function, right? So I in particular, I'm not returning anything from the click or from the click function here, right? So the click is not going to work because I am not returning a function. Click is going to say, well, where's the function? Because this function is definitely not returning a function, so that will not work. So what we're doing here is we're wrapping it inside of an outer function, right? Because that's what the click expects. It expects the declaration of a function, not an invocation of a function. Well, unless that function returns the function, then that would be okay. but that's not what we're doing, right? So the function expects, the click expects a function. So that's what we're doing. We're wrapping our call to the create function inside of another function. And basically, that's what we're doing, like that, right? Because that's what click expects. It expects to call a function. And so you're passing a function object instead of a function call. Yes, exactly, right. And this is gonna come up many times in JavaScript in general, that we wrap a function with inside of another function, because what we're doing is that we're saying, hey, I don't want to invoke this function right away. I want to invoke it later, right? At some point in the future, for instance, when I click this button, that's when I want to invoke this function, not right away, right? So we're giving it the declaration of a function as opposed to the invocation of a function. Okay. All right, excellent. So I can create, whatever courses create, right? Okay. I might want to clear it after I create, right? So what I might do here is that after I create, I might set the title, to be an empty string, right? And the seats too. I might set the empty string. So, for instance, if I type something and I do create, notice that I am clearing the title field so that it's convenient, so I can type again, create, and it's there. Make sense? All right, excellent. All right, so we can create, we can delete, we haven't done update and we have not done delete just yet, but I want to put that on hold for a second. One big thing that we have not done, right, is connect this to a remote server. Notice that if I refresh, all my changes are gone, right? So we need to make this permanent. We need to make this so that it can be stored permanently at somewhere, right? And we are giving you a server where you can store these things. Let's see, a question on the chat. Is it better practice to define the function within the click or call it in the click and then define the function? So I find it much easier to read, right? To have all this thing outside declared as an actual function, right? In JavaScript, this is a very common syntax. You'll find it all the time. It's called lambda. It's a lambda expression, right? It's a function that only makes sense here. It's serving its purpose right here, and nowhere else. Okay, and so it's in the JavaScript community, and I would say maybe in the JavaScript culture, it's a bad practice to declare a function that is not meant to be used anywhere else, right? And because you tend to litter the namespace, right? It's a function that its only meaning is here, right? It's not meant to be used anywhere else. So lambda functions are very common, and in the new version of the language, version 6, they have a very terse or very simple syntax. Let me just show you. I can remove the function here. I can remove the function. I can say arrow. I can say the arrow, right? And so now now it looks more like a lambda, right? It doesn't even have the function in it, right? And if I didn't have these, so let me remove that for a second. If I remove that, I can make it even simpler. I can, if it's one thing that I'm doing, I don't even need the curly brackets, right? So this now kind of illustrates, the very common use of these types of lambda functions that they're almost invisible. You don't even see it, right? It's just these 4 characters, and that's it. Okay, but they're playing that role of wrapping, right, or delegating or postponing the invocation of a function, right? Because in JavaScript, functions are treated like any other object, right? Like any, just like a literal string. You can pass around a literal string. Passing around a function is as common as passing around a string or an integer or whatnot. And that's something it takes a while to get used to. All right, so let's start refactoring this a little bit because what we want to be able to do is talk to the server, talk to a server to be able to retrieve this, right? So let's clean this up a little bit. One of the things that we're going to clean up is one thing that we're going to clean up is the fact that, remember that we put our jQuery stuff down here. See that? And the reason we did that was because this DOM had not been read in yet, right? Had not been parsed by the browser yet, right? And because it doesn't exist yet in the browser's memory, that's why we put it at the bottom, right? So make sure that the browser had parsed all this text and had already created all those objects that we're going to be referencing, right? All these objects here, we're going to be referencing all those objects. So we wanted them to be there. But nevertheless, it would be, for instance, if I remove it from here and I bring it up here, right, and I put it here where syntactically this is where it should live, right? In the head tag, not way down there. If I refresh, you'll notice that nothing works, right? Nothing works, right? My create doesn't work anymore. My delete doesn't work anymore. And Professor, why did you write title : after the function? Title : after the function. Let's see. Title : here, you mean?
So after you wrote the create course, you had written title : and then again you had written something just outside this create course function. Like, I mean, just before you were explaining,
Oh, you mean like when I had
yeah, this one. Yeah, what where is the title going?
No, I meant just to do. I just meant to do this. Sorry, that. Yeah, the colon means nothing. Sorry.
Okay.
It's because I had copied this.
Okay, sure.
And I just meant to use that. Thank you. Good catch. Good catch. Yeah. So nothing works now, right? Nothing works. And the reason that it doesn't work is that this JavaScript, right? It's making references to all these elements, blah blah blah, and none of this exists yet, right? Because this is here, and the browser hasn't yet, right, gotten to parsing any of this, right? So it hasn't created a DOM just yet, right? And the way the browsers interpret the JavaScript is that they get executed immediately, right? You execute the JavaScript, and it's way too early. I don't have any of this yet. Okay, so how do we fix that? So the way we're gonna fix that is by creating a function here. We're gonna create a function here, function main, right? And this main function is where we're gonna put all the setup, right? We're gonna set up all our code, right? Actually, let me put this way at the bottom. I'm gonna put this main function right here. And what we're gonna do is that the main function, we're going to invoke this main function after all the DOM has loaded, right? So how do we do that? So jQuery has a nomenclature that reads like this. So you have jQuery, and then you give it a function. So if you pass a function to jQuery, right, what you're saying here is that you're telling jQuery, hey jQuery, wait for the whole DOM to load, right? Once the DOM has loaded, then invoke this function. And the name of the function doesn't matter, right? It could be called init, right? It doesn't matter. The name doesn't matter, right? The name of the function, okay? The meaning here is that jQuery is now going to wait until the DOM has loaded, and the browser is going to tell jQuery, say, hey, I'm done. I've done parsing the HTML. The DOM is loaded. Go ahead, do your thing, okay? So here we're going to say console. I'm going to say alert. DOM has loaded. Okay, so there it is. So DOM has loaded. So we get a notification when it's there. Is the colon necessary? No, it's not. Okay, so what we're going to do is that all this stuff, right, of loading all this, right, We're going to do that in main, right? So that when we know that the DOM has loaded, right? So we're gonna have to rewrite this. So let's rewrite this and make this prettier, right? So we're going to do this. We're going to move this function. We're going to move it all the way to the top. There it is, right? So we're only going to declare the functions. We're going to declare the functions, but we are not going to actually bind them, not yet. We're just going to declare the functions, right? We're going to bind them in main or in init. We're going to take those variables, right? We're going to take those variables. Now that this init is going to be invoked after the DOM has loaded, now this is going to work. Now this is going to work, right? But that was not the only thing that was broken. Let's keep fixing this. Let's see, add course button. So this one too, right? This is a variable, and this cannot exist. This cannot run until the DOM has executed. So this is the same thing. Let's clean this up. All right, so I'm going to remove this. I'm going to move it into my init. Okay, and not var. It's those over there. Okay. Let's see what else. This too, you're setting up the click. Setting up the click that should happen in my init. So let's remove that and let's move it into my init. So I have the button and there's my click, right? So let's keep going. Add course. I got data, the heading. Okay, this too, right? This too. Well, this was just us playing around, right? This was not actually anything meaningful. So I'm just going to comment that out, right? We don't want, this was just us playing around, right? The body, we'll need the body, right? Because we need to append to the table body. So I'm going to move this to the declaration above. There it is. But the actual jQuery here, we're going to do that in main or init. There it is, table body, and no var. Okay. Okay. Let's keep cleaning this up. There's a create course. So this was just us playing around, right? Just adding some courses there for just to demonstrate. So we don't need that. Render the courses. Okay, the render course is going to need the table body, which hopefully we've gotten, right? We're just going to empty it. We're going to prepend all this with the courses that we're iterating over in this for loop. Adding this over there, very good. This deletes, this works, right? Because we are adding those deletes when we are rendering them. Console, yada, 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 delete, render courses. Okay, that looks right. Render courses. So this render courses, this one was, oh, right, this is to render the default courses that we're putting in this array, right? In this array, in the initial array. These are also dummy courses, right? That I'm going to comment out. Right? This was just us playing around with some initializing a couple of courses. I'm going to start with an empty set of courses, no courses. And we're just going to be able to add new courses, right, as we go. So there's no need for us to actually call the render course. It was just us demonstrating this, right? So let's keep going. The create button. Okay, so what's the create button? Did I kill the create button? Let's see, what was the create button? Create button, uh-oh, did I blow it away? Oh, there it is, right? It's this one right here. Create button. Okay, so this is the create button. And I believe this was us. All right, so actually we do want this, right? Create. All right, somebody was asking me, why did I do it this way, right? So there's only really one of them, right? So let me remove that. Remove that. And where do we do this? Again, we're going to do this in the main, right? In our init. I'm going to grab that and we're going to add it right here. Okay. All right. I think we fixed everything. Let's see if we're back in business. So we have, I think these are, let's see if this works. Create. Okay, there we go. All right, so yeah, so this is working again, right? Yeah, it's working, right? And I should be able to delete. Yeah, everything is working. I think the initial courses that are in there, I think that's because we added some dummy courses here. Yeah, this over here, right? These were sample hard-coded courses that I'm going to comment out, right? That was just for us to demonstrate. Let's see. Okay, now I should be able to just create a couple of courses. Create, there we go. All right, excellent. So we cleaned up the course. We cleaned up all the code, right? Maybe obviously we might want to remove some of these comments somewhere. We have all the event handlers. We have create course. We have add course. Where do we put delete? Oh yeah, delete. I think we did delete where? Oh, right here, right? We did delete over here. Maybe we want to break this out too, right? Instead of being this function, let's put it in a separate function. Let's grab this, copy it, and let's declare it here. So this will be function, delete course, okay? And the way it's implemented is how? Let's see, it's implemented. It's expecting the event to be passed as an argument, right? And then we get the button, the class, the ID, and then we splice the array and we call the render, right? So let's replace this. Let's replace this with calling the function delete course. Without this parentheses, without the parentheses, careful, right? Because if we make this parentheses here, we're going to call the function, and whatever that function returns, that's what's going to go as an argument to the click. Here, instead, what we're saying is that when I click, call that delete function, right? Let's see, can we fix this here? Can we fix this here? When I create button, I guess we could. I guess we could move all this into the create course. Let's see what the create course takes as argument. Right, so create course takes the object as an argument. Anywhere else are we using this create course? Let's see. Okay, here and here at course. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a good implementation, right? It just takes as argument an object. I think that's a pretty good implementation, right? So here it's just basically I'm going to call that function, right? But with an object that I'm going to read from these values. Yeah, that's a pretty good implementation. Let's leave it like that. All right, any questions? All right, so let's see if we can rewrite this. Let's see if we can rewrite this so that it's connected to our server, right? Let's rewrite this with our server, meaning we're going to be using the service that we have not built yet. So this is our service. Where is it? Okay, we haven't written it. Let's write it. So what do we call it? I think we called it course service. No? We called it services course service client. Let's write it. So meaning we're going to put a directory here where we're going to put all our services, not courses only, right? We can have users, courses, modules, lessons, right? We can have a whole bunch of services, right? So we're going to do services, and we're going to create here a JavaScript. We're going to call it course.service.client.js. Okay, so here we're going to create something that looks like a class, right? And that we have given you the start code here, right? In JavaScript 5, there are no classes, right? But you can sort of implement something that looks like a class with a simple function, right? And let me show you how to do that. So we give you the beginnings of a service. Where is it? Service. Service. Okay, there's our service. So let me copy that. And I'm just going to paste it here. And let's go over this code for a second. Okay, so this function here, is using the same syntax as our other functions, right? It looks very similar to all the other functions that we've written, right? So function init, function render, function delete course, blah, blah, blah. It looks just the same. But we're going to use it slightly different, right? We're going to instantiate this function. We're going to say new with this function. And when you do that, it treats it as a constructor of a class, okay? So this is the old way of doing classes. Next week, we're going to talk about the modern way of doing classes. All right, okay? But still, you do find this legacy syntax still being used widely. So I'm going to cover just today, this week, and then never again the rest of the semester, right? Because this is slowly, you know, fading away and falling out of favor. But nevertheless, it's worth knowing, right? So this is it's the old way of creating a class, and the way you establish local variables and local functions is by using the this keyword, right? And so here, what we're doing here is that we have local functions inside of another function. See that? A function declared inside of another function, right? Almost like a class, right? Where you have variables and you have functions inside a scope, okay? So we're binding it to the local instance, okay? So this.createUser is this function right here. This.find all users, there it is, right? Find user by ID. Update user, delete user, all right? They are all being bound to the instance. So when we do new admin user service client, we're gonna have access to all these functions in there, okay? Then we have here a local variable that we're also binding to the local instance that is pointing to our server, the server that I am giving you, right? I'm giving you this server, and now you're going to put here your NEU ID. I'm going to be using my username. Okay, do not use my username. All right. Otherwise, we're going to end up everybody using my username, and that's going to crash the system. Don't do that. Right. So use your NEU ID. I'm going to replace this with my username. Right. As I told you earlier, you can put here anything that is unique to you. Right. Okay. Genuinely. And it's courses. And so this is an admin user. Actually, it shouldn't be admin user. This should be, I'm just going to call it courses, you know, courses service client or course service client. And the functions that I want here is that I want to be able to create a course, right? I want to be able to create a course. I like to be able to find all the courses. Okay, so all the CRUD operations that you might want to do with courses. I want to be able to find a course if I know its primary key. I want to be able to delete a course. Okay, I want to be able to update a course, right? And I'm going to be working with courses, right? And here you can put whatever you want, right? But I'm going to be working with courses, and this is me. All right, excellent. So these two, I'm going to name them correctly. Courses, find all courses, and these are very common operations that you would want to apply to any type of data type, right? In our case, it's courses, but for you, it could be movies, it could be, you know, events, it could be, you know, sports teams and scores and things like that. So we're going to be implementing this here. This is what we're going to be implementing it. Okay. All right. So let's implement it. I'm going to be implemented for courses, but you're going to be implemented for users, right? So I'm just giving you an example on what you would do so that I don't literally do the homework for you, but I show you the way of doing it. Okay. All right. Excellent. So let's see. So what are we going to do when we load? Right now we have this empty array of all the courses. There it is. There's an empty array. We want to fill it with whatever the server might have, and we would like to display those courses on the screen. So how do I fill this course here? Okay, well, first we're going to need the service. There's our service, right? There it is. We need to instantiate it here in our code. We need to instantiate it. All right, so let's do that. Let's do var, and this is a course service. It's going to be new course service client. See that? Now, the reason this is available is because I loaded it from the HTML. In the HTML, I loaded it right before my controller. See that? So I load the service right before my controller, so the controller sees it and I can instantiate it. Now, what I'm going to do is that I need to fill in this course. I need to fill it in. Okay, so where do we do that? We want to do that when the document first loads. And when do we load? Well, in this init function, right? This init function says, hey, the document is ready. This is a good time to go fetch the data. Go fetch the data. Okay, so let's do that. So we're going to use the course service, and there's a function in there called find all my courses. So let's use that. So dot find all my courses. Okay. All right, so let's try that. Let's run this. Let's see what happens when we call that function. What are these errors? Course list style clients. Well, now I have that. I still don't have client the styles, right? So let me remove that for now because it's bothering me, that error message. So let's comment this out for now. All right, so it looks like nothing happened, or did it? Let's see. If we go to network, we can see that something did happen. Let's see. Courses. This is. Notice that in the network tab, we can see all the network connections that the browser makes. Right. It went out and fetched. The first thing that it fetched was the course list HTML. Right. And then the course list HTML was referencing Bootstrap, so it went to fetch Bootstrap. And then it was also referencing Font Awesome, so it went and fetched Font Awesome. It was also referencing jQuery, so it went out and fetched jQuery. Okay. It fetched the service client and the controller. That's all it fetched. That's unfortunate. I was hoping that it, oh, I know why nothing happened, because the find all courses, there it is, find all courses, it's not doing anything. Okay. All right. So what do we want to do? We want to go fetch data. We want to fetch data from where? From this URL. From this URL. So let me copy that URL and let's paste it here in the browser. If we pasted it, what happens? Oh, look at that. There's data there. There's data. Now, where did that data come from? Well, from previous semester. I've been adding data, and I think I showed it to you a couple of days ago, right? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 6 courses in there. We have a title, we have an owner, we have a modified, right? Well, at least we have a title. That's that. We need that, right? So let's go fetch this data. Let's go fetch that. How do I fetch the data? How do I fetch this data? I can do it manually. But we can also do it programmatically. So how do I do that? I want to fetch the data. So there's a function called fetch. There's a function that called fetch. That if you give it the URL, that URL. So notice I cannot use URL. It's gonna say I don't know that variable. So you might be enticed to say this.url. That's not gonna work either. Right? JavaScript has a funny way of interpreting the keyword this, which is not the same as you would interpret it in Java or C# or any other language. But JavaScript has a very peculiar way, the way it works with the keyword this. This is always bound to the narrowest context. In this case, the context is this function right here. See that? Whereas here, this is bound to this context, right? So here, the this keyword is what we mean, right? It's the current instance of the course service client when you called new. You know, when you called new here, right? This is bound to this right here, which is the way we would interpret it. But in here, this function, this is bound to this function here, which makes no sense, but that's how it works. So to get around that, to be able to access all the other elements in the current class, in the current instance, there's a workaround that we declare a local variable that is bound to the original value of this, so that if we want to access URL or any other function, right, we can say self.url. Okay. All right. So that is this value here. Okay. So what does fetch do? let's see. Let's refresh this. Let's refresh this. Let's clear this out. Refresh. Let's see. Well, we got the same things up before, right? The CSS, blah, 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 right? Oh, but look, there's a new one here, courses, and it has data. See that? So it went out and fetched the data for us, okay? And it retrieved it. We can see the URL, how it fetched it. There's the URL. So we can programmatically generated a GET request to the server, and the server responded with, okay, yeah, here's your data. And you can look at it. This is the raw data, as a string. And then the way it's being parsed by our JavaScript engine, right? So it's being parsed right here. Okay, so how do we use this data? How do we use this data? Well, you'd be tempted to say return, right? And if you return that data, you would be tempted to say that this this final courses, we can say var courses, right? Or we can just say, courses is equal to whatever that returns. Unfortunately, that's not how it works, right? If I console log courses, let's see what that returns. Let's look at the console. Let's refresh. Notice that we don't get the array, right? Instead, we get a promise. What the heck is a promise, right? So a promise is a mechanism that allows JavaScript to talk to servers asynchronously, right? Asynchronously, right? Because the browser, doesn't want to get stuck waiting for a server to respond, right? So all these all these network connections, these networks all occur asynchronously. So the browser has a whole bunch of threads, right? And when it sees that it needs to go fetch an HTML and CSS and fonts, awesome, and jQuery and all these other files, what it does is that it spawns off a whole bunch of threads, right? And tells each thread to go and fetch different things, right? And they start coming into the document, right? Parsing it and then making sense out of it and then rendering the content over here, right? Okay. Well, we need to be able to play in that world of asynchronous communication between the browser and the servers. Because notice this, that this is pretty cool, right? Because this first initial HTML is being fetched from my local machine, right? But Bootstrap is being fetched from Mac CDN, blah, 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 somewhere, right? There's the address. Font Awesome is being retrieved from somewhere else. jQuery is being retrieved from Google, right? And these two are then fetched from my local machine. So the browser can establish communication with, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 servers that are out there, each one with their own speed, each one with their own timing and whatnot. So any one of them could fail, right? I mean, you've seen that, an image might be missing, or a button, something, or a link is broken. Any one of these might fail. So this retrieval of data from the generic server could fail, right? So we don't want the case where the any code locally on our machine, running on the browser, just gets stuck waiting for data to come back, right? So that's why it's asynchronous, right? I send the request, but I'm not going to wait for it. I'm just going to continue doing other things. So how do we do this asynchronous communication? So this is how it's done. Okay, so we're not going to return this. Well, we are going to return, but not this fetch, not the fetch. Instead, we're going to return something else. Okay, within the fetch, what comes back, we see that it comes back not the data, a promise comes back, right? An object comes back, and that object has a function. That object has a function. Well, I guess we could do it more explicitly here, right? So here's the promise. Here's a promise, okay? Right? And that promise has a function that allows us to register for a callback, right? The way it's going to work is that these threads are going to go out, right? We're not going to wait for them to come back. Instead, we're going to register and say, hey, go out and do whatever you need to do, and then call me back. Let me know when you're done, when the server responds, right? So that we know that we can continue. And the way I'm going to register for the callback is by using your promise, and I'm going to use the then function, allows me to register for a callback, okay? So this callback, and the way it works is, we give it a function. We're going to call this function, We're going to call this function when the response comes back, and then it's going to give us the response right here. Here's the response. And then we can do the console. We're going to take a look at the actual response coming from the server. All right, let's take a look at that. And let's not assign this to anything yet. All right, so let's do that. Let's take a look at the console. There's our response. See that? The response comes back saying, yep, there's some headers coming back from the server. The server said that the response is okay, right? The status is 200, it's okay, right? There's a body, there's content embedded in the body, right? Now, this content, we don't know what the content be. It could be an image, it could be a PDF document, it could be a song, it could be a movie, it could be anything, right? In the body, we can embed any MIME type, right? Any internet related piece of data, right? So it could be a streaming, service, right? That's coming back, right? So this too needs to be consumed asynchronously, right? The body also needs to be consumed asynchronously, right? Because we have to build the bits and bytes that are coming back, right, into some object representation, right? So this response, right? We don't have the data just yet, okay? Instead, we need to consume it bit by bit, and the way we consume it is that response, right? Response has a function that knows how to consume it and convert it into a format that we know. We know that the data that is coming back, we know that it's formatted in a JSON format. It's not formatted as a Netflix movie, it's not formatted as an image, it's not formatted as a Windows Word document. We know that the data that is coming back, right, there it is, right? We know that the data that's coming back is just plain ASCII, right? It's just plain raw text that is formatted as JSON, okay? So the response has a function that knows how to convert it into any number of formats, right, including the JSON format. And what this function is going to do is that it's going to consume, right, the content slowly and convert it into JSON, okay? All right, so this function is going to return, that's what we're going to return. We're going to return whatever that format comes back as, and then that's what we're going to return.
Hi, Professor. May I interrupt you for a bit?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one question about the callback using the then function, right?
Yes.
So you said that it's a callback, but I'm just confused about when it's executed. You said when the server returns, but like you said, it might be a lot of data and there might be some time delay between the start of the response and the end of the response.
Exactly.
So is the then function called as soon as the first bit of data comes in? I was just confused about the timeline about when is the then called, and how is it consumed bit by bit?
Yeah, it gets called when the data stuff's coming in. Yes, when the first bit starts streaming, it gets called, right? And this JSON is responsible for accumulating the bytes and the bits, right? And
so the response object is just building up as the data is coming, and after everything is done, the .json is going to pack it in one thing and just give it back to us.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Right. Now let me clean this up a little bit, because this looks fairly complex, but it's going to look a little easier if I clean this up a little bit. Okay, so instead of using this promise here twice, right, I'm just going to remove this promise here, right, and I'm going to remove this like that, right? So that should be a little bit easier to read, right? So, and we had a return there, so that's a little bit easier to read. Also, we don't really need this console. Okay, so that's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so that's what's coming back from here. So this is going to be here. There it is, our find all courses. And find all courses, so what comes back from here, from .json, is again, it's an asynchronous consumption of the data so this return is also a promise, right? It's another promise saying, yes, I am consuming the body, I'm building all the bits, and when I'm done with all the streaming data, I will call you when I've converted all the data into its JSON representation. So here, find all courses is again a promise that we're going to listen for when it's done. And finally, at the end, hopefully, we're going to get the actual courses from the server, okay, in a function. Right? We're going to receive that. I'm going to receive that. And finally, we can copy it into a local variable, the actual courses. All right? All right. Let's see if this works. Let's see if this blows up. All right, let's go back and refresh. And it didn't seem to work. Let's see. Network. There's our courses. Let's step through this. Source. Let's take a look at the service. That's the controller. That's the service. We can put some breakpoints in here. Okay, let's put a breakpoint there, another breakpoint there. Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, Professor. The screen
Looks
just
like I
froze
lost
for a bit.
network. Sorry,
Yeah.
it looks like I lost network for a second. All right, can you still see my screen?
No, Professor, we see you.
Oh, okay. Share screen. Yeah, I'm still lost communication for a bit. Okay, there we go. Here we go. So I'm refreshing. I'm stepping through. There's my URL. Let's continue. There's my response. Right. I'm going to return this JSON, and in the controller, hopefully, it'll come back to here, where we make the call right there. Let's continue. And let's see the actual. There they are. See that? The array that's coming back, and we're going to assign it to our local array. Let's continue. And okay, we assigned it. Oh, you know what we didn't do? We never told it to actually render the courses, right? So let's do that. That we assigned it, and we're going to call render courses. There we go. Let's try that. Let's refresh. We can take out these breakpoints. Let's say continue. There they are. Look at that, right? These are the courses. These are all the courses that we had earlier, right, in here. Make it look a little prettier. There we got CS5545, 5610, 78, right, 5500, and there they are. See that? All right, looks like it's working, right? Let's refresh. We don't have seats, we don't have semesters. That's fine. Let's see, is there a question on the chat? Now I can, okay. Fake class function is higher level. Oh, you know what? I don't know if Google is YouTube is still streaming. Let's see if that's still okay. Is this still working? Yeah, that looks like it's working still. Good. All right, excellent. How about delete? Does delete work? If I refresh, notice that I'm not actually deleting, right? It's not really deleting. It's deleting it from the local array that I have in my local cache here. But when I refresh, it refetches everything from the server and it re-updates. Okay. And also, if I create new courses, if I create, right, and if I refresh, notice that they're not there really. Okay, so we need to consolidate any local cached version of our local array. We need to consolidate and send them over to the server to make them permanent. Okay, so let's look at being able to delete. Well, let's see if we can delete. Okay, so delete we know that delete is here, right? There's our jQuery delete and delete course, right? And there's our delete. And this is able to remove the course from our local array. There it is, right? It's removing it from our local array. But it's not telling our remote server that it's being deleted. So we need to consolidate the two, make sure that they are always in sync, right? So we're going to use here on our service, we're going to call this function delete, which we haven't implemented it, right? Which is going to be very, very similar to this fetch. Okay, so how do we do that? And what we're going to do is we're going to do something similar. We're going to say return, we're going to do a fetch, okay, the same URL, so self.url. But, right, as the assignment suggests, the URL is as follows. The delete, this is to remove, this is the pattern for the URL. Basically, it's the same as always, but with the ID mapped at the end. See that? The ID mapped at the end, meaning I have to concatenate here this ID that I'm passing here. I'm going to concatenate this string and then the course ID. Okay? Now this looks very ugly, right? So we're going to use another syntax that's a little bit easier to read. Instead, we're going to do this. We're going to put a backspace. This is a variable. This is a variable here, followed by slash, and this is another variable, followed by course ID. Okay? All right. Right, so we're going to send that fetch. Now, by default, this fetch, by default, all by itself like that, by default, it's always a get, an HTTP get, right? If you want it to be something other than a get, you have to specify, right? You have to specify in an optional object, an optional configuration object, that you can specify things such as that the method should not be a get, but instead it should be a delete. So you specify a JSON object, which is an argument to the fetch function, right? Right, it's too long, so I'm putting it in the second line. And now I'm saying that it's a delete, all right? Okay, and that delete, we're going to send it back, return, right? So let's use it now. Let's use it. So what we're going to do here is that this splice and this render, right, which actually manipulates the local array, right, and re-renders, should only happen after we have confirmation from the server that we have successfully removed it from the server. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is that we're going to call the course service, the course service. We'll call the delete course. We're going to pass the ID. Now, how do we know the ID? Do we have the ID? Do we have the ID? Well, actually, we do, right? Remember, the ID. This ID is really what is the index of the course, right? Is the index of the course. So. So really, this is an index, right? They're not an ID. So let's name it for what it really is, right? Let's name it. Use the proper naming. So this is the index, right? And the ID is actually var, the index. I mean, not the index, the ID of the course. Notice that each course that comes back from the server has an ID. See that? And it's in this attribute ID. See that? Okay, so and all the courses have it. So we could, and it's now in the array, right? Because we copied it into a local array, right? So we can grab the actual course from the array. So courses sub the index, right? And then it has a field called ID. That is the ID. That is the actual ID. And we can pass it to the delete course. We can pass the ID. And this is going to return a promise. you know, just like before, the fetch is always going to return a promise. Okay, so we're going to say then, right? We don't really care. There's a function in the promise. We don't really care what it comes back with. We know it's going to just come back with something, but we're going to ignore what it comes back. It actually comes back with a status, right? Whether it was successful or not. And once it comes back from the delete, we are guaranteed that the server was successful in deleting. And that's when we're going to splice and render our courses locally, right, on this side of the browser. All right, so let's try it out. Let's try it out. Let's see. Let's take a look at the network, see what's happening between these two guys. So let's go to network. And let's refresh. Let's remove this. Let's remove this course. Looks kind of weird, right? So let's delete. It looked like it works. Let's see what happened, what the network looks like. Okay, let's look at what happened here. So there's our delete. Oh, so notice this this options here. See that? So the URL that went out, right, is the correct URL that has courses and then the ID, right, that long ID unique identifier. But notice that we send a method option. So the client, the browser, is asking the server for permission. It's asking the server, hey server, is it okay that I delete? And the server responds. So what the browser is asking, hey, what are my options? And the browser is responding. Response headers. Yeah, it's responding that the allowed methods are get, post, put, delete, and options, right? So the server is saying, yes, delete is available. And when that happens, then the server, the client, the browser, actually sends the delete. Okay, if the server would have responded with the response that did not include delete, this would have failed. The browser would have said, oops, not sorry, the server is not allowing deletes. Okay, all right, notice that we removed it remotely and locally. Notice that here's our old list of courses, right? And there's the one we removed. Let's refresh, see if it's still there. Let's see. Okay, it looks like it's not there. See that? So we have successfully removed it. And from our user interface, it's gone, right? Notice if I refresh, it's no longer there. It's gone, right? Let's remove a couple more. Let's delete that one. Let's delete that one. Let's refresh. Notice that it has been permanently removed from the remote server and it's reflected in our local user interface. Make sense? All right, so we know that we can retrieve all the courses. We know we can remove a course. How about creating a brand new course? How about creating a brand new course? Let's do that. So creating, how does it work? Let's see. It works when we click on the create button, right? In the create button. And the create button takes as arguments the data that comes from the UI, from the form, right? And what does it do? Right now, it's just pushing it into the array and then rendering the course, right? Well, we see that's not really, it's going to fly, right? Because we can say, you know, create and create and create. But if we refresh, obviously, those are not being sent to the server. So we need to send it to the server. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to go back to the service client, and there's a create function. We need to build this, right? And so it's going to do the following. It's gonna be very much like this fetch over here, fetch. We're going to return this fetch. And remember, the default here is to do a get, but we don't want to do a get, we want to do a post, right? We're going to do a post, right? So we're going to say that the method is going to be a post. Oops. Post, okay? We also need to say that we need to tell the server, hey, we're going to send you some data, and we need to tell the server how to interpret that data, because we could be, you know, uploading a file, right? It could be that we're uploading an image or we're uploading a PDF document. So we need to tell the server how to interpret the data that we're sending, right? And the way we do that is through the headers. right? The headers are meta information that we can send to the server, including things such as the content type, right? The type, you should interpret it as follows. I am sending you JSON. So this is a standard, industry standard, that all data that goes across on the internet, right, is properly labeled so that, you know, the network can interpret what to do with it. Plus, we need to actually send the data, and the data is right here, the course. See that? So let's actually send it. So we need to say data, body, in the body, just like we read the body from the response coming from the server, we're going to send something in the body, embed it in the body, and then the server is going to have to, you know, stream it, right? So we need to convert our JSON representation into something that can be streamed across the internet, right? And the way we do that is convert it back into some string representation, a string. So the way we do that is that we're going to use a library that is always available in the browser. It's called JSON, JSON, all caps. And it has a function called stringify, right, to convert a JSON object into its string representation. And we're going to pass it the course. Right, so that converts the course, the object representation, a binary representation, into a string representation that can be streamed across the internet. Okay? Anyway, so this, we're going to send that over to the server. The server is going to respond with a promise saying, okay, at some point later, I'm going to let you know if that succeeded or not. Right? So we're going to be waiting here with a then, and the response is going to come back. The response is going to come back, and the server is going to say, yep, I got it. And what I built, I built the server so that when it responds to a post with data that you sent over, I respond to you with the actual object that I was able to store in the database, right? With a new ID, with a new unique identifier, right? Any meta information in there, I send it back to you. And you're going to use it. You're going to return that, the JSON. You're going to convert that into JSON. Again, it's coming in stream format. You need to convert it into a binary representation of JSON. That's what this does. Okay, so that we're going to call that service, course service create course. We're going to pass it the course. This is going to come back with the actual course that we were able to store, right? Function, the actual course that we were able to store in the database, right? And that's the course that we're going to push in our local array, the actual course, right? Which is going to have a ID, a unique identifier, right? It's going to have the title, it's going to have all other stuff in there. And then we re-rendered that course. All right, let's see if all this actually works, right? Let's try it out. Let's refresh. And let's build a couple of courses here. So this is CS1234. Seats is 12 seats, and spring. Let's say create. All right, looks like it worked. Let's refresh. Okay, see that? It's actually made it into the database, right? With all its and its primary keys too. Notice that now, right, if I refresh here, you'll notice that we have our new course, CS1234, with the seats and the semester. Notice that this one does have the correct fields because that's what we sent. The other ones were old versions of courses I created in previous semester. So let's remove all the old ones. So let's delete, delete, and delete. Let's create new ones with the new format. So this is CS. Let me make sure. Let's refresh. They're all gone. Yes. Okay. So CS5610. 90 and spring, let's create, and then CS3200, 80 also spring, create. Excellent. And I refresh and it all works, right? And I should be able to also delete. Well, let's delete this one. Let's refresh. Yeah, so we can delete, we can create, right? We can read all these. How about updating? I want to be able to update a course, right? So for instance, I want to be able to select and copy that data into the array, into this, so that I can then modify, I can edit it. Let's do that, right? So we have this select button, right? So the select button is going to be very similar to our delete button, right? Right. So when we're rendering, we want to know which one did you select, just like we knew which one did you delete, right? So we need to the button for selection, we need to give it a class, right? So this class, this is webdev.select. And again, we need the IDs, just like we used for the delete. We're going to use the same thing for the select. Okay. But now that these guys are coming from a server that has IDs, right? I could be a little more clever, and instead of putting the index in here, I can actually put the ID because I have it in here. I can say course dot underscore ID, the actual ID of the course. Okay. So let's do the same thing we did for the delete, but for the select. And this is going to be select course, select course, which doesn't exist. Let's build it. Let's create it. So it's going to look very similar to the delete course. So this is going to be function select course event, right? We're going to retrieve the button. Well, let's retrieve the button. So this will be the select button. Okay, and we're going to get the ID, the actual ID from the attribute ID from the select button, right? So we have the ID, and now we can, now that we have the ID, do we want the ID though? Actually, in this case, we probably wanted the index. Because if we have the index, we could just copy the values of the index into the field, don't we? Yeah, we could have found. That's fine. We could work with the ID. Now, it gives me a chance to introduce to you a nice JavaScript utility function called the find function. You can say var the course. I can look it up by iterating over the array. Right, so we can say courses dot find. So here's a course, and I'm going to use a new syntax. This is the ES6 syntax. So this is a function, right? This is the parameter for the function. I'm going to say if the course ID matches the ID, and it's going to return the course instance that matches this criteria. If it finds a course whose ID is equal to the ID, it'll return it, and then we'll have it right here. Perfect. All right, now we know the course. We know the course. So we can update these values, right, with the actual course, right? And we can say $, the title. Was it title? Was it title field? What do we call it? Title field? Oh, title field. There it is. Title field. Title field. I want to set the value to be the course.title. And I want to change the seats field to change its value. I'm going to copy this from the course.seats. Okay. And same thing for the semester field. I'm going to set the value to be the course.semester. Okay. All right, let's see if this works. So let's select. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Let's see. What was the console error? Type error, title undefined, blah, 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 blah. Line, course 35. Course title. Let's put a breakpoint here. Let's refresh. Let's select. Let's see. The course comes back as undefined. Courses. We have the ID. We do have the ID. Courses.id. Oh yeah. No, this is wrong, right? There's an error. This is course ID. Let's try it again. select. Okay, all right, the course now is not undefined. Okay, so let's finish this. Let's run this. Okay, now it works. Okay, so see that I can select one or the other. See that? I can select it. Very good. And finally, I know I'm over time, and feel free to drop if you need to go. I'm just going to stay maybe 5 more minutes. I'm going to finish up the update, right? So I can push this. But if you want to drop, that's fine. I'm just going to finish the update real quick, and you can watch this later when at your leisure. All right. So I've selected it. And notice that it's there, right? I can select the one here. Now I need to be able to update it, maybe change this to something else, right? Or change the seats here to 800. Right, so how do we do that? Okay, so first of all, we need to store it maybe in a local variable to remember which is the selected course, right? Var selected course, right? Initially is null. And maybe we should assign it here, right? Selected course. Right, so that when we click on update, we'll have the selected course, which includes the ID, right? It includes the ID in there, right? Right. So that when I click on the update button, we can take those updates and send them over to the server, right? So let's do that. So we have the update button, right? Somewhere here we have the update button. There it is. I'm gonna give it a class so we can grab it. So this is webdev.update button. Okay, and we're going to grab that. I'm going to say var update button, and we're going to do that in the init function. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to say $sign update button. It's going to be jQuery dot web update. There it is. Okay, and we are going to bind it. I'm going to say update button. Oops. Update button. Click. Is going to be handled by a function called update course. Okay, which will implement maybe the up here. Right, here's a function, update course, and what's the update going to do? Well, we have the selected course, right? We know which one we selected it. Let's print it out. Let's see if we remember what that was, right? Selected course. Let's see. Let's refresh. Right, and let's look at the console. Right, so let's select this one. Let's click on update. Ooh, it's null, so something went wrong, right? So the select, what's going on? Maybe let's refresh, maybe. Let's select, let's do update. Null, Selected course, did we misspell it? Let's see. Where would this be selected? Selected, let's see if we select it. Oh, var, okay, no. We don't want a local variable. We want this variable over here, right? So let's do that again. Let's refresh. Let's select. Let's go to the console. Okay, let's do update. There we go. So we are storing the object that we remembered. Yes. Okay. We know which one we updated, but notice that it has the old values, right? CS5200. Say if I change this. Right, and I do update, notice that we don't have the new values. We have the old values in the old object. So we need to update it, right? We need to up all those things, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to say update. In the update, we're going to copy all those values. We're going to say selected course. The title is going to be the new stuff that you typed in the title. In the title field, we're going to grab the values and we're going to update all these things, right? Selected course dot seats is going to be from the seats field. We're going to read, right? Selected course dot semester, right? We're going to read it from the semester field. We'll grab the value. Okay. Now that we have it, we should be able to send it over for saving it in the server, right? We're going to use the course service update course. And the update course is expecting as the first argument is the ID, and the second argument is expecting the actual course. This is going to come back with a status saying, yep, I was successful or not. I'm updating. Okay. And what else should we do? Now we should be able to update the array with what we updated, right? We should be able to say, do we have the integer? We have the index. We should store the index so we know which one actually no, let's learn how to do this. You can find the index, right? You can say var index of which in our array of courses, right? We can say find index. So we're going to iterate over all the course, and the course whose ID is equal to the selected course ID. When you find it, we'll know what index it is. Okay, so now when we know the index, we can say courses sub index. I want to replace it with the selected course that contains all our new values. Yes, and then we can re-render. We can render the course again, courses. Okay. All right, so the only thing left to do is this update course. Let's fix that. Let's implement it. It's not there. We never implemented it. Where is it? There it is. It's this one. Same thing. It's going to return a fetch, right? It's going to have the same URL. Going to have the same URL with the ID though, and it's going to, the method is going to be a put, right? We are going to be sending JSON, so we're going to have the headers. Right, so we're going to need the content type, right? And finally, we need to send in the body, we need to send the new course. We just stringify it with the course. This is going to come back the response, which we don't really care about. I'm going to use the new syntax without function. And we're going to return the response.json. That's what we're going to return. And the update is going to get the status and do this. Okay, let's see if this blows up. Let's refresh. Let's update 3200. Okay, let's change it from 80 to 90. And 3200 is 01. Let's update. Let's see if this fails. Oh, looks like it works. Now let's refresh. There we go. See that? This changed from 80 to 90, and the title has been changed. See that? All right. So I'm going to push this to the repository so that you can use it as any way you want. Hopefully, you'll be able to use this as an example on how you can go about doing your work for the users. Obviously, it's not going to be identical, but hopefully, it'll help you get going. All right. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Professor, do you have a minute? I have another question, if
Sure.
you're available. Yeah, so I was just wondering about, is there any difference between using the function syntax and using the lambda expression? Where we passed functions inside, like the arguments. You also said,
Yeah.
you know, this is like a syntax which we can use.
Yeah, no,
then
there's no practical, technically, there's no difference. Syntactically, there is. There will be a difference when we start using ES6, like I did here. Where is it? Yeah, see, I'm using ES6 here, and I'm using ES6 over here. Okay, there is a difference on, for instance, how this keyword works, how methods and scope works. But other than that, you know, it's more or less the same thing.
Okay. And one other thing that I was concerned about was, is there a difference between the await keyword and the then that we are using, or is it something similar that happens?
Yeah, so the await and the async keywords are basically syntactic sugar for the .then, right? It's a wrapper around the .then. So underneath, it's basically .then.
Oh, okay.
But it wraps it so that it looks a little easier to read, and we'll cover that later. I want
Okay,
to
got it.
show you what's happening underneath before we cover that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Professor,
Yes.
could you also explain the difference between the triple equal and the double equal?
Sure. Just a second. Service. Commit, git, push. Yeah. So the equal checks whether things are equal, but it will cast the variables to check to see if they're equal. So for instance, the number 1 will be equal to the character 1, right? But if you do triple equal, it verifies that the data types are also the same, right? That on both sides, they're both integers, they're both strings, they're both characters, and then it'll check whether they're the same. So in that case, the number 1 and the character 1 are not the same, right? But with a equal, they are the same. So triple equal is much more stricter.
Okay, thank you very much.
You should always use triple equal.
Hi, Professor. Could you explain what is a promise?
So I instead register a function, and then I can go on and keep doing anything I was doing. And then when it comes back, the promise notifies me that says, the thing that you sent, right? It's done, right? Come back and handle it. So promises is a mechanism that allows us to register for things that will happen in the future. That's what a promise is, right? I promise you that this will happen in the future. That's the mechanism.
Okay,
and we'll be using it. Go ahead.
What is .then? What does it do?
So that's the mechanism. That's the function that allows you to register for the callback, right? You give it a function and says, hey, when you're done, right, what I asked you to do, call me back and call this function so that I can come back and handle it, right? So the way I register is the .then, right? In the function .then, I pass in a function, which is basically what we're doing here, right? We are, in all these cases, right, we're passing a function that will be invoked in the future when this succeeds. When this succeeds, later on, 3 seconds from now, I don't want to wait for it. So JavaScript, when it comes here, even though this is a function, usually when we think about a function is that we wait for the function to complete before continuing, yes? Not in an asynchronous call. In an asynchronous function, we don't wait for this to complete, we continue, right? But before we continue, we're gonna call this then function and say, hey, when this is done, right, call me back at this function, right? Because I don't want to wait for it now. I need to go. I need to go handle some, some cat, little animations and things like that. And I'm busy, right? And so I don't want to wait for it. So at some point later, call me at this function over here, and that's how I register using the .then function. So this object, this function returns an object that has a function declared on it called then, that is used for invoking later in the future. And you'll have plenty of times to practice this. And as you practice, it'll become more and more natural. I know it's somewhat jarring. It's expected, very much like when you first learned about pointers. You'll have to use it several times before it becomes natural. All right, folks, gotta go. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay.